Hello. Good to see you.
All right there, Revenants. Welcome back to Code Vein. And I had a couple of questions over the past week, I guess it was, about the transforms of the chromes on the weapons and how they operate, and what they are used for, and how you would kind of use them, and what happens when you put certain ones on certain weapons. So I'm not going to do a full weapon by weapon analysis here. This is going to be very generic, from over the top, and for the very unique specific weapon cases and such. I'll point out a few. You can investigate that on your own, but I'll give you the rough overview of everything here, and then you can take it from there. So first things first, we'll start with the Alleviated chromes, and this is a very simple chrome. You get it from Louis, and you need to give Louis books, and he'll give you 5 trading points. You get 10 trading points, and you can buy an Alleviated chrome. And this chrome is meant to subtract 20% from the base value from the standard. Everything is based off of the standard weapon itself, and so you have to kind of level one of your regular weapons up to whatever level you're going to be looking at the others, and then you compare from there. So it's a 20% reduction in the base value. The scaling value stays the same, so that's where your damage reduction comes from. Then you have a 20% reduction in block. So you see here we have an 80 in slash block, and here we have 64. So it's 20% less on all three of those values there. You also have a 20% reduction in your stamina reduction value over there, so that's okay, I guess. And if you're doing a lot of blocking, it's not good, but for if you're just running around because you're trying to be quick, then it's okay. And then you have a 20% reduction in your weight value. So down here, you can see that we are 1 pound lighter, which is a 20% reduction in weight. Okay, so that's the Alleviated chrome. So it's useful, but it's definitely taking that 20% hit to your damage is very sad, because you have to make that up through different weapon buffs and everything. But the weight sometimes is a very valuable consideration, and so you have to think about that weight value of 20% reduction. Sometimes that is really helpful. So it's very good on really heavy weapons, because as you can see here, it takes off a lot of weight. 26 pounds difference between these two is a huge difference. So something like this here, you're losing 14 pounds, which is great. Um, Something like this, you're losing 18 pounds. So it's really good if you're looking for a way to get a heavier blood veil paired with a really good weapon. So that would be a way to have access to that. Okay, so the second thing we'll talk about is the Fortified Chrome. This comes from Yakumo. You give him the brandy, the sake, or the Bugarali doll, and you can get two of those items traded to him for 10 points to get a Fortified Chrome and Fortification Chrome. And these things are kind of straight up super simple. They uh, they add 15% to the base of the regular weapon. So here's 60, you add 15%, and you get 69. The scaling stays the same, it doesn't change because this is only a base modifier. And then the defenses increase here by 10% of the truncated value there. So there you see that the crush value is 65, so crush will increase by 6, and then that'll take you to 71, and in fact that's 71. And if you check here, it's 65, it increases by truncated 10% of 65 to 71. Same for the slash and pierce. And if you look at something that we have access to here, like this one is 87, 70, 87, so we should get 878 as our increase to our blocking values there on our defenses, and 87 plus 8 is 95, 70 plus 10% of that is 7, so 77, and 87 plus 8 is 95. So that's how the increase in your blocking value works, because sometimes you'll see weird ones like this. You have an 88, a 90, and an 88. Those are all really close together, but if you look at the Fortified, what'll happen is this one will get 8, so this will be 96. This one will get 9, so it'll be 99, and this one will get 8, so it'll be 80, or 96. And we look at the Fortified, 96, 99, 96. So you're getting a truncated 10% value out of this added to your defenses here. Then for also, you get a 15% increase in your weight. So here you're at 80, and 15% of that would be 12 pounds. So here's 92. So then that's a 15% increase in your weight. Oh, well, went offline, I guess. So you definitely want to make sure that you have the weight capability to support that overall. Then also you get a 10% increase in your stamina reduction there. So here we have a 60, here we have a 66. So that's nice. And it's the same truncated madness that you had before with the blocking here. So you get that nice increase there. Okay, so that's Fortified Chrome. So make sure you just check the base value, and that's all you want to do. You're just increasing that base value, which is very helpful for buffs, because all the buffs typically the weapon physical attack buffs, they all increase based off of your base value, and so you want to have as high base as possible. Okay, so next on the list is our intensified chromes, and the intensification chromes, the intensified chromes come from Jack. Give him coins. He'll give you five trading points for coins, and you can get those fairly easily. I think it's the second or third mission from Shang out in the underground area where you find him. You can give those coins to Jack, and he'll give you intensified chromes. Now, the intensified chromes are probably the weirdest to talk about overall, because they have a very convoluted formula. It's nothing so simple. So typically what happens here, now this changes for bayonets, so take this for a grain of salt. What happens is you get a 40% reduction in your base value, but your stat scaling values all go up by 1 half step level. So here you'll notice we're at a C plus, and an increase of a half step level would be a B, and there's a B, and here's a C, so this should go up to C plus, and it does. It doesn't add any extra values here, like these don't all go up to E's or something like that because they were dashes before. If it has a value there, then it increases it 1 half step. But then on the scaling, this is where things happen really, really weird. It has to do with your level, so scaling is based on your level, and then it also is based on your blood code, and then it's also based on how far above or below the blood code value you are from the required stats. So it's very, very complicated, and I'm not going to go into all the crazy math here because I still actually don't even know very well in depth to explain it, but I know the mechanics of what's happening. So that's why it's so rough, because these values change simultaneously as the scaling and the base change. And that's why it's very difficult to find that value, because you have two different things simultaneously changing, so you can't ever lock down one variable that you can test and try. So very, very difficult to find that, but typically it's on the order of an increase to your scaling of about 20%. Sometimes it's a little less depending on if the weapon scales really hard off of your blood code or not. But if it scales pretty well, it'll be above 20%, and if it scales very poorly, it'll be below 20%. So keep that in mind. This is not always the best choice, but you want to find those weapons where it's above a 20% increase in your scaling, because of that 40% reduction on your base value. It's really hard to make up for that 40% loss. Oh, excuse me there. Okay, but when this comes to bayonets, it's all over the place as to which chrome is better, fortified or intensified, and it all comes down to testing the weapon, which is better. For example, I see a lot of people with the Libertador fortified and the Libertador intensified. The intensified has a higher shot damage than the fortified, but then for something like the Argent Wolf bayonet, the fortified has a higher shot value damage than the intensified. So this is very such a hokey kind of a chrome, because it varies from weapon to weapon to weapon, and you really got to know which weapon has the increased scaling values, as opposed to the fortified to just simply increase the base value to get more damage out. So make sure you're testing those here at the dummy, and make sure you're checking out which chrome with which weapon is most beneficial. And for here, you can see that the fortified gets us a 1962 and the intensified is a 1901, even though it has a much higher stat scaling here of S, and even though we're running volley with an S plus index, it still doesn't matter that the fortified, even though it has a lower value here, because the base value is so high, the reduction in base value is very poor. So you want to try and be looking for those weapons that have really low base values already. And what typically one-handed weapons fare really well here under this this area. As you can see here, the fortified is at an 851 because the base value is so low on this weapon already, and the intensified goes up to 856 because it scales very well off of strength and dex. But because the 40% is coming off of such a low number, it doesn't really hurt you that much. So 223 over 116, and you can see 223 over 116. Yeah, so it's basically a 50% almost reduction. 116 over 223. Yeah, it's almost a 50% reduction. So you can see that some of these weapons, they have a real hard time with the numbers here, but that's 50% from the fortified, which is again the 15% increase and stuff. So definitely better to use the intensified on base values that are very low, because then you're not losing a whole lot of damage, but you're getting that huge increase in stat scaling. And so it would be better off in this case to go for something like the intensified rather than the fortified. So the intensification chrome, you definitely really want to be paying attention to that base value. Make sure it's as low as possible before you start slapping chromes on things. So here, like this for the pipe is 196, and oops, I don't have this one fully increased. So let's go power that up real quick, and I'll show you the difference it makes here in low base values. But the higher the base value, the more you want to go for. Okay, thanks, Rin. The more you want to go for a fortified chrome, and the lower the base value, the more you want to go for an intensified. So you capitalize on the values and the benefits of each weapon. Okay, and so here we're at 192, and a fortified is 196. So you can see, but that it does almost the same amount of value as the fortified, and again, that's why this is so goofy, that it has to be tested and sought out on purpose to actually see that. So if we look at this here, we have a little bit of damage difference here. And if we go for our buffs, you'll see that that they run neck and neck with each other, the Fortified and Intensified here overall. And so, but if we go down to the Blazing Claw, you can see that the Intensified is winning out in that regard, and the Fortified for the Ice Blood 2022 and the Intensified is less. So again, like here you have a really good example of where the Intensified is more, but then you have directly after it an example where the Fortified is more. And even though this has a low base value, it's still just up to the weapon and how the actual scaling values operate. And again, I don't have a super good handle on those. I have an idea, but again, it all comes down to, here's another example of scaling doing better for us rather than the Fortified. So it really is weapon specific based on their scaling values and how they operate. So you definitely want to make sure that you're checking in with each weapon and how the chromes operate between the Fortified and the Intensified. It's not always one or the other. You definitely got to check for each weapon versus both of them. Okay, so then the next one is the Gifted EOS Chrome on the weapon. Now this one's fairly straightforward as well. It removes the scaling value off of everything, off of the entire weapon for the gift triggers, for the actual physical damage value and everything, and it takes that base value and it multiplies it by 50% and adds it up. So you can see something like the Impulse Anchor. This thing has a very high base value, and it goes up to 810 with the Chrome there, with the EOS Chrome. And you can see here 645 is not very high, 621 is not very high, and the Impulse Anchor just really takes off there with that huge base value. And same thing here with the Wrathful Balmung at 732, but the Lost Zweihander has a monster value of 870. So if you're going for a gifted weapon, you want that base value to be as high as possible. That way you add a monster value here because all your scaling is removed completely off of the weapon. It makes formulas really easy to calculate, but it definitely has a loss there. Now, why in the world would you go for gifted weapons? Well, gifted weapons do exceedingly well with Bridge to Glory if you're running mind-based blood codes like Demeter or Pseudo Ishtar or Eos, or Theon could be a candidate, or Vali or Perseus or something like that. And the reason being is that if you use one gift, Bridge to Glory, it takes 75% of your light value and it adds it to your weapon, which is really great for a gifted weapon. So here we're at 1574, and for a Fortified, because it only adds 50% of the light value, we get 25% more increase in our damage just because it's gifted, and that's really nice. And so here you can see the difference between the two is that the pipe gifted does so much better than the Fortified, about 30% increase in your or a 33% increase in your damage there. That's a huge amount of value. And if we look at our weapon here, we have a 90 base value, and if we add overdrive, you'll notice that we didn't go up very much. We only went up 27 value there, and that's because overdrive operates only off of the base value of the weapon. So we got 33 added to our our weapon damage here, which is pretty pitiful. 33 over 90, so it's adding 25%, and then half of that, which is another 12% or so, and then it's adding it to scaling. So it's not a very good buff when you're running gifted weapons, simply because it's looking at the base value and adding it into the scaling value. But if you're going for something like the impulse anchor with it, where it has a massive base value, you get a huge scaling value coming out of it. So really, really good there. And then if you add in um, bridge as well, you can see that the impulse anchor is actually starting to take off in value here. But it's still not as good as the fortified, and that's again why you need to see which values are the best. And it's almost better than the intensified, but not just not quite. But the bridge to glory and gifted weapons, the pipe is the #1 candidate in my book for using a gifted weapon, and this is why, because it has such a low value. You can pair this with so many different things to really help this weapon overall. And some of the one-handed weapons, because of the scaling value, it just really doesn't make any sense at the higher levels of the game to use a gifted weapon, except the pipe. However, at low runs of the game, like level 1 runs and such, it's in your best interest to go for a gifted weapon rather than a intensified or a fortified, if you're going for regular damage and such. And you'll have to check that on your level 1 characters. I have that on my level 1 character, which is why I went for so many gifted weapons when I did the level 1 run, was because it does very well on lower levels, because your scaling is almost negligible anyways, and to remove it and get a 50% increase to the base value is huge at low levels, especially because you can level up weapons and increase that base value regardless of your character level. Throat's getting a little scratchy here. Okay, so that's the gifted. Definitely check this out. Now the Devour Chrome, this comes from Mia, and you give her Fragrant Tea, and she'll give you 5 points. Now you can get Fragrant Tea off of the first time you meet Chang, so you should be fine to give Mia Fragrant Tea the first time you meet her. So you give her those, you get 2 Fragrant Teas, you get a Devour Chrome from her off of 10 points of trading value. And when you add this to your weapon, it decreases your base value by 20%, which is not too good, but it increases your drain ratings by 50%, which is really nice. So here we had a 0.15, here we have a 0.23, here we have a 0.37 and a 0.56. So it increases your drain rating pretty quickly here on each of the weapons. So that's the bonus value of the Devour. The Devour Chrome is just getting more drain rating, but it comes at the cost of a 20% decrease in your base value of your weapon, which means that you're going to not have as high of buff values as you could potentially, because like adrenaline, it works off of the base, overdrive works off of the base, offensive order works off of the base, so you definitely want to have as high base value as possible. But if you're going for a drain weapon, I would say go for something with a low base value so you don't lose out on too much of that base damage. But and the reason being is because the scaling value doesn't change. So here you see we have a 718, and here we have a 718, and the scaling value, it just doesn't change. So here's even the fortified 718, and the only thing that's changing here is the base value. So that's why you want to go for something with low base value, high scaling, and that would be something sort of like the Blazing Claw would be good, because you see here 628 is a pretty good number to have as a scaling value. Same thing here, 561 is not too good, but it's still pretty high, and you're not really losing out too much on that damage value there. So yeah, the Devour Chrome is pretty useful if you're going for drain ratings, but it becomes exceedingly useful on the Brionic because this has a really low base value anyways, so you don't really need to worry about it. Okay, so then the element chromes, these three here, fire, ice, and lightning, Gothic, Beyond, and Isis chromes. Isis chromes come from the cathedral typically, Beyond chromes come from the Ridge of the Frozen Souls typically, and the Gothic chromes come from the City of the Falling Flame typically. And so what these do is they reduce your scaling value by 20%. So it's 80% of the regular scaling value. So here's 127. And oops, I don't have a plus 10 version. Okay, there we go. So this is at 127, and this goes down to 88. So you're losing 20% off of the main scaling value, but your base damage doesn't change. So that's very nice. So at this point you want to have something with very, very, very high base value and low scaling value for the element chromes. But then what it does is it takes that 20% off of the scaling value and it adds it to the actual damage of the weapon type. So this then would get lightning damage, which then comes outside of the multiplier and re-multiplies by physical. So it's very, very, very powerful because the 20% you're losing here on scaling really doesn't matter because it's inside the parentheses of how the multipliers work. And then you get it as lightning value, which then multiplies by the 148 out here. So if you take 148 times 1.2, that's 178. And so here, when you look at something like this, you're at 196. And here you're at 175, and even though this looks like it's at 148, it's indeed at 178, which is higher than the Devour Chrome, which is almost higher than the Intensified, higher than the Alleviated, but not as high as the Fortified on this one. Now, if you would go for something else, like the Wrathful Balmung here, you'll see that it's almost as much as the Alleviated overall. And 1962, I guess, would be your number you would want to try and get above. And here, 1696 times 1.2 is 2035. And so you can see here that it is going above and beyond the 1962. So just because this has 20% here that it removed from the scaling value, because this weapon has a really high base value overall, the Fortified actually loses out as compared to the raw base damage here of the element chromes. So you definitely want to watch out for these. But the other thing about the element chromes is that it can remove scaling values of a half step or a full step, 2 steps, I guess you could say. So it can remove one value here, so it went from an A plus down to an A, which is not too good. But then on other weapons, like here, it does one full step. So here our dexterity is C, and here our dexterity is D. So it goes down 2 steps. And again, it's weapon dependent, but our strength here, it goes down a half step from C plus to a C. So it's weapon dependent, and it depends on which values you're talking about, because things like the Blazing Claw here, you can see that we lose, we go from C in mind down to a D, and we go from a C in strength down to a D in strength. We go from an A down to a B in dex, and we go from a B in willpower down to a C plus in willpower. So everything went down a full step except for willpower. So willpower only went down a half step. So it depends on which weapon it is, and it depends on which scaling value you're looking at will depend on how many values down it goes. But typically that's okay unless there's a specific reason why you would need the scaling to be very high for something like these gift weapons where they have gift triggers on them, and the gifting attacks that come out of them those damage values will go down sharply because you have the reduced like mind and willpower here, for example. Okay, so that's elements, and next is status effects. So status effects are very basic. You have a 5% reduction in your base value, and then you get the status effect applied to the weapon down here. Okay, so I believe that's all of them, and like I said, the best way you can go about figuring out which weapons do which gifts and which chromes is just by literally getting all of them and testing them out here at the dummy to make sure that you're doing the right amount of damage and the right pairings of um, which which attacks you're going for and how you're utilizing the weapon. So anyways, that's how the chromes work, and happy investigations to all of you, and we'll see you in another video.